shape. And looking for a high today of 72, 73 tomorrow with a few passing showers in the afternoon and evening, and 61 for Thursday. It's trying to warm up right now. We've gotten about 47 currently on 107.5 The Game.
Nine o'clock on your Tuesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. It's Head back here in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Couple days off. Nice to get a little refresh, a little breather before the next couple days leading into the Christmas holiday. So enjoyed a little bit of time away. Appreciate Terry and everybody else holding down the fort for me over the past couple days. Jack will actually be back in with us tomorrow as he's taking an extra day off, but plenty to get into over the course of the next hour. But as we do.
It's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm.
Sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It is time for 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick Me Up, brought to you by George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803 all nines. As we sit here today on December 17th, we are officially 2 weeks away from the Citrus Bowl, where South Carolina will wrap up its 2024 campaign, taking on the Fighting Illini of Illinois, looking for that coveted 10th win of the season, something, of course, has not been done a whole lot of times in the history of South Carolina football, and has not been done in over a decade since Coach Spurrier was obviously here with those run of 11 win seasons in a row. And we're going to hear from Coach Beamer coming up tomorrow. I believe we have a press conference as well as Carolina calls tomorrow night at 6 o'clock to get his final thoughts, publicly at least, ahead of the Citrus Bowl. Because, again, you're going to have Christmas and all that kind of stuff next week, so we won't have our usual press conferences and stuff then. So tomorrow's kind of the last, or really one of the last chances we're going to have to hear Coach Beamer's thoughts and get his insight on the Illini and all those kind of things ahead of the game coming up in 2 weeks. But you definitely feel like going into this game, South Carolina has a point to prove, or at least that's the message that the team seems to be spreading about how they're approaching this game. Because, look, we look at bowl games a whole lot differently than we did, even 5 years ago, right? Where, in years past, even if you weren't in the running for the national championship or whatever it may be, going to a Outback Bowl, going to a Citrus Bowl, then the Capital One Bowl or whatever, going to, the Texas Bowl or anything like that, were still viewed as accomplishments and things that you still wanted to go out there and win. But with the advent of the transfer portal and all these other kind of things, opt-outs, things like that, bowl games have no doubt diminished in their meaning to a lot of programs. But it seems like where we currently sit right now, 2 weeks out, it seems like everybody's in at this point in time. Seems like everybody is motivated going into this game. And I think that was, put perfectly yesterday by Demetrius Knight on SEC This Morning. Cut number 2 here, Ed. This is D. Knight yesterday talking to the crew on SEC This Morning about Carolina having, in his words, a point to prove in the Citrus Bowl here in 2 weeks.
Of course, there's disappointment, but there's more of we have more to prove, and more of we're not finished, and this is not going to kind of put us down into the next season, but this is going to skyrocket us into the next season, especially with expectations. So in our minds and in the entire locker room, we had the slight feeling they were going to, have us on the outside looking in. So we're close enough just that we could smell it, we could taste it, and that just let us know that we're not far off at all. So that does nothing but build our confidence, and it didn't matter who we were going to play next. I I apologize that it's Illinois. It's not their fault, but we're a team that's feel a little foot in the mouth right now. So we'll probably be playing with a little bit of attitude come that game on 31st.
And there's a lot of people that can say those kind of things, and it's just words. You actually have to see it on the field. But I think about these past couple of years, and Beamer's really good at getting his team to buy in, right? Let's go back to last year going into the last month of the season, where South Carolina was 2-6 entering November, needing to win 4 straight games just to get themselves to a bowl game. And there's a lot of programs out there that kind of fold at that point, saying, the season's kind of lost. Let's just kind of go through the motions, get the season over with. And, a lot of guys have their eye on the portal at that point in time and, going on to whatever the next opportunity is for them. That didn't happen. Now, yeah, they didn't end up winning all 4 of those games. They came up short to Clemson at the end of it, but still they won 3 games, put themselves in position in that final game in the regular season to have a shot at making a bowl game. Of course, they ended up coming up a little bit short. This year, you're sitting at 3-3 after the Alabama game, where all of us had written off any semblance of hope for Carolina to be even in consideration for the college football playoff. But the message coming away from that game was, no, we got to run the table here. We're sick of feeling this way. We got to go out there and start winning these big games. And they've done that. They have not lost a game since that game, and obviously didn't end up getting selected for the portal, as D Knight, alluded to. But you made a pretty strong case for yourself, right? So I believe that it seems like they're going into this game very, very motivated, right? And at this point in time, as bowl practice is already begun, it doesn't seem like anybody's opting out. I know Kennard declared for the draft the other day, but in that announcement, he didn't say anything about skipping the bowl game. And by all indications, I'm assuming that means he's practicing right now. So maybe everybody does come back for this game. I know I'd said at the end of the regular season, we'll enjoy this defense specifically in the last couple games because it's not going to be the same when the ball game rolls around. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe Beamer is getting everybody to be in for this game. And again, 10 wins is something that has not happened a lot in the history of South Carolina football. Only 4 times prior in program history. So this means something. And if anything else, it, as D Knight alluded to as well, it can springboard you into next season. How you close out a year can give you momentum going into the offseason. As ridiculous as it may sound to some people, it can have an effect. I look at what happened last year in the Orange Bowl, right? You had 2 teams in Georgia and Florida State that felt like they'd been snubbed by the College Football Playoff Committee, most, specifically Florida State, who's a 12-0 conference champion, and they said, to heck with the Orange Bowl. They're going to leave us out of the playoffs. We don't care. We're going to, go there with our third stringers, guys opting out, guys going to the portal, all this kind of stuff, and we're just going to go through the motions because this game doesn't matter to us. And they got smacked by 60 points by Georgia, but, no big deal. They're going to be fine. Well, guess what? They went 2-10 this year. And that, I'm not saying that happens to everybody that doesn't care about a bowl game. That's a pretty glaring example of how, your attitude to close out a year can carrying over into the next season to where it's been a disaster and they've gone 2-10. On the other side of things, Georgia, who also got snubbed by the College Football Playoff Committee a year ago after only losing 1 game by 3 points in the SEC Championship, said, no, we're going to go out there and try and make a point to the committee that they shouldn't have left us out. And again, I don't know how much of a point beating a hapless Florida State team is, but they went out there and took out their frustration, and they've obviously done great this season, are now in the college football playoff with a first round bye. So I think you can kind of look at those as examples of saying, hey guys, we want to be the Georgia in this situation, not the Florida State. Because you guys are all opting out. If you guys are acting like you don't care, yeah, a lot of you guys aren't going to be back for next season, but that affects how the mentality of this team going in the offseason is going to be. And it seems like everybody's buying in and wanting to make this a possible victory for Carolina, coming up the end of the month. And it's really funny. Look, we're going to have a lot of time to break down the specifics of this matchup and, what exactly this Illinois team is from a personnel standpoint over the course of the next couple weeks. But it's really interesting to me just how similar South Carolina and Illinois are on paper when you just kind of compare where these two teams are positioned at as of right now. I mentioned South Carolina only has 4 10-plus win seasons in program history. Well, it's the same thing for Illinois. And the last time they did it was all the way back in 2001. They went to the Sugar Bowl that year. So they're in a very rarefied space. Now they went to the Rose Bowl back in 2007. They lost that game. They won the 9 games that season as well. But this is a position that they're not used to being in, and they feel like winning a 10th game would do a lot for them in terms of the value of their program, especially going into next season. They also feel like they've been disrespected by the College Ball Playoff Committee. This is something that may have flown under the radar, but Brett Bielema, their head coach, as we were getting set for the final rankings, made his case on Twitter, comparing his resume to Ole Miss, to Clemson's, to Miami's. Now, they don't have as strong of a leg to stand on, I feel like, with South Carolina's, and there's a reason they're ranked as low as they are, because the quality of their wins aren't quite as good. But he lays out some interesting things. They have the 30th strength of schedule. They have 7 wins against Power 4 opponents. Their only losses are to the number 1, number 3, and to a 7-5 Minnesota team. And they were 3-0 to close out the season. Again, their argument's not as strong as Carolina's, but in their mind, they feel like they've been disrespected by the playoff committee in terms of where they were ranked and why they weren't at least in the conversation for maybe one of those final playoff spots, sitting at 9-3. The disadvantage to them is that the Big Ten, while top heavy, with Oregon and Ohio State and Penn State and teams like that, the middle to lower tier not as strong as you have in the SEC, which does hurt their resume a little bit there. But that's besides the point. They, like Carolina, feel like they were disrespected by the College Ball Playoff Committee to close out the season. So there's a motivating factor there, much like Carolina, to go out there and prove some people wrong with this game coming up here at the end of the month. And it's also very interesting as well. I didn't even realize this until I was kind of, scouring over his head coaching record. These two teams have almost been mirror images of each other through the last 4 seasons. And Brett Bielema, much like Coach Beamer, taking over here at Illinois back at the start of the 2021 season. And in that 2021 season, they went 5-7, just missed out on a bowl game. Carolina, of course, went 6-6 and won their bowl game for a 7th win in year number 1 under Shane Beamer. Year number 2, they went 8-5 and lost the ReliaQuest Bowl. Year number 2 for South Carolina, they went 8-5 and lost the Gator Bowl. Last year, 5-7, missed a bowl game. Last year for Carolina, 5-7, missed a bowl game. This year, 9-3. Much like South Carolina, going to Citrus Bowl looking for a very coveted 10th win and to prove a point in a lot of ways for that program. So these are two teams that have kind of mirrored each other these past couple seasons. And also, in terms of talking about the momentum going into the offseason, they're two teams that are trying to break through into that next tier of their respective conference, right? Again, Illinois has had a couple of solid seasons these past couple of years, but they're not thought of in the same way as the Oregons, as the Ohio States, as the Penn States, as teams like that. Same thing with South Carolina. 2022 was a good season. This year has obviously been a good season, but nobody's used them in the same way as Georgia, as Texas, as Alabama, as Ole Miss. So they're trying to break through and get to that next level of their respective conference. So you have two really mirror images of each other facing off here in a couple weeks in the Citrus Bowl, and two teams that really care a lot. Much like South Carolina, Illinois has not lost a lot to the transfer portal, or as far as like contributing players. Like, they've got pretty much all their team buying in, wanting to make this 10th win happen for the Fighting Illini. And I think it's going to be a pretty fun game here coming up in a couple of weeks. But of course, before we get to that game, we have the whole slate of the College Ball Playoff coming up this weekend with the round 1 games, and obviously the quarterfinal games coming up on December 31st and January 1st. Just how many teams have a shot at winning the college ball playoff, though, is an interesting question to ask. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Extra Point Tyler Head flying solo with you on your Tuesday here on The Game.
mean, I think we're the 6th in the history of like sports or something. I saw we're the 6th biggest underdog to achieve. I was reading something, it was like the miracle on ice was 2 and we're 6, and I'm like, come on guys, let's be a little more realistic. Maybe you guys just didn't, maybe just the changing of the college landscape has opened up an opportunity for people to be, greater outliers. But that's not taking away anything from our guys. It's more, I felt like we had a good team from the start. And I think our guys have definitely exceeded expectations. And I think they hope to continue to exceed expectations. But this isn't about me.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Towerhead along with you here on your Tuesday. Jack Felcher will be back in with me, or with us tomorrow, by the way, for let you know we'll be out at Firehouse Subs over in Casey, 542 Knox Ave Drive. Myself, Wes, Chris, and Jack from 9 until noon. So come by and see us. Of course, we'll have plenty to talk about with the college ball playoff coming up this weekend. That was the voice of Arizona State head coach Kenny Dillingham talking to the media yesterday about Arizona State's chances, and they are the longest of long shots, it seems like, when it comes to college ball playoff, and ranking up there with apparently the miracle on ice as far as long shots to win the respective championships of what they're entering into. I think it's a really interesting conversation. I don't think anybody expected when the college football playoff expanded again that suddenly we're going to get a lot of new champiins, right? In fact, I went back and looked at this yesterday. In the last 10 years of the BCS, go all the way back to 2004 into the end of 2013, there were 7 different teams that won national championships. When the playoff expanded to 4 teams in 2014, and the 10 years we did that, there were 6 different teams that won championships. So even expanding the field to 4, we still didn't get as many champions as we did in the BCS era. And I'm of the belief that expanding the field out to 12 is probably going to, I don't say lessen that number, but I don't think it's necessarily going to grow that number anymore either. If anything, I feel like expanding the field out makes it even harder for one of these underdog type of teams to win the national championship because of how many games you have to put together to make something like that happen. Like let's go back to 2022, right? Where TCU, who lost the Big 12 championship game, still got to play Michigan in the Fiesta Bowl. Won that game, crazy game, back and forth, high scoring and all that kind of stuff. Got through, and then just got their doors blown off against Georgia. But let's say instead that Georgia had a bad night. Georgia, starts 7 minutes throwing interceptions, and the defense is blowing coverages and all that kind of stuff, and TCU was able to escape with a victory, even though we could clearly see that Georgia was the better team. All it took for them was 2 of their best games, to win the national championship. Now you've made that even harder. So especially if you are a team that's playing in the first round, where let's say SMU, for example, who comes in as a low seed, the lowest non-champion seed, having to go to Penn State. So if SMU wants to win the national championship, they have to go win a game at Happy Valley. They then have to beat Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. They have to win another semifinal game in a bowl game, and they have to win the national championship. So you've made their path even tougher. And even for teams that are getting buys, so Boise State, again, getting the bye into the Fiesta Bowl. Arizona State, similar thing when it comes to the the Peach Bowl, where, okay, let's say you survive that first game against whoever you end up matching up against. Well, then Arizona, you got to go play Oregon in the semifinal. Georgia, Boise State has to play Oregon in their semifinal game, assuming all those teams ending up winning out, and then they got to go play whoever wins in the national championship. And I'm saying it's impossible, because again, you can put together some strong games and shock the world, but the pathway to it has made it that much harder. I go back to something Sam Acho last week when the playoff rankings were officially announced on ESPN, put out this tier list of teams that he considered to be contenders, dangerous, and Cinderellas when it came to the college football playoff. And he separated them into these 3 groups with 4 teams apiece. In his contender tier, he had Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Georgia. The dangerous tier was Clemson, Tennessee, Notre Dame, and Penn State. And the Cinderella tier was Arizona State, which, funny enough, they had the Arizona Wildcats logo there. Talk about disrespect. Indiana, Boise State, and SMU. And I agree for the most part with this. I don't think there's anybody out here that thinks Arizona State, Indiana, Boise State, or SMU are going to win the national championship. I really don't think there's anybody that thinks that Clemson, Notre Dame are going to win the national championship, though they have them in that dangerous tier. I for one, think that, in my opinion, I don't have a lot of belief that Ohio State can win it, to be honest with you. They certainly have a roster that is strong and capable, but I'm of the belief that that loss to Michigan, the last time we saw Ohio State play, is going to be very detrimental to them and their psyche and mindset going into the college ball playoff. Not to mention the fact they got to take on a very good Tennessee team in round number one that's going to be as fired up and motivated as ever. And it sounds like, Big Orange Nation's going to be, going to be taking over a lot of the horseshoe, more than maybe people thought, initially when this game was, game was announced. And then Ohio State, if they win that game, have to take on Oregon again in a rematch of a wild, chaotic game that they, peed down their leg and lost with Will Howard at the end of it, on the road in Eugene, Oregon. I just don't have a lot of belief that Ohio State is a legitimate national championship contender. And again, Ryan Day, when he takes on these great teams, keeps coming up short. And that is a trend for a reason, and I don't have belief they're going to be able to go very far. So I really look at Oregon, Texas, and Georgia as kind of the three that I think the national championship's going to come from. Obviously, Texas has not been able to get past Georgia, and they could theoretically rematch with each other in the national championship game if the bracket ends up working out that way. But that's, a story we'll get to if we end up getting there. But they obviously have the roster and the skill on that team to get that far. Georgia, we'll see what the Carson Beck injury effect has. They're being very coy with it right now, not letting a lot of information out because they don't have to. And I think that's very smart, playing it close to the vest, because whoever you end up playing in that second round game, whether it be Notre Dame or Indiana, keep them guessing all the way up until then. Make them prepare for two quarterbacks. And Gunnar Stockton gives you abilities, as you saw in the SEC championship game, where I don't think it's that far of a drop-off. And obviously Georgia seems to play its best football when the lights are the brightest, minus the Ole Miss game, a couple weeks back. And Oregon's been the flawless team. They're the only perfect team in college football this year. They obviously have the roster and the talent to get it done. When you look at these other teams, I don't think Tennessee with Nico is consistent enough to make a deep run in this thing. They could, I think, beat Ohio State in round of one, certainly. Penn State can't win big games. That's their knock. And James Franklin, big game James, call him that for a reason. He just cannot beat these teams that are better than him. And he's never been able to do that really in his history at Penn State, and I don't think they're going to go on some magical run to make that happen. Clemson is lucky to be where they are by virtue of being gifted a spot in the ACC championship game by Syracuse beating Miami, and obviously they outlasted SMU. But when they played the better teams this year, Georgia, South Carolina, Louisville, they've lost. And I don't think they're going to go very far in this tournament either. Notre Dame, give them credit. They have won down the stretch, but they've got the embarrassing loss of the year against Northern Illinois. And I don't think they're a team that is all that deep and talented from a roster standpoint that's going to be able to withstand a deep run in the college football playoff. So really, if I'm looking at true contenders, I think it's Oregon, Texas, and Georgia. I think your national championship comes from one of those three teams, and everybody else is just hoping to win a game or two. We'll see what happens. But very excited for the first round of the college ball playoff coming up this weekend, which we'll dive into plenty as the week goes along. Normally, you do our NFL top 5, bottom 5 on Tuesdays. Jack's not here, so do something a little bit different coming up next. We'll examine truly who the best teams in the NFL are and who has the rightful claim to number one as of right now. It's coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you, flying solo on your Tuesday here on The Game. Tired once again here to tell you about our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. I tell you about it all the time, but I'll remind you once again, if you notice things going on around your home that are a little bit odd, you need to get them checked out. Things like cracks in your exterior brick, cracks in walls or above windows and door frames, doors and windows that might be sticking, uneven or bouncy floors, or cracks over your garage door. If you have any of these issues at all with your home, you could have serious foundation problems. That's where our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialists come in. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantyconvicts.com. They'll send a professional out to your home to evaluate your foundation issues and get you fixed up right so you and your family can live comfortably going forward. Again, go online to schedule an appointment today at cantyconvicts.com for our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists.
Again, we're just trying to find ways to win, and this is going to help us in the long run. But still, a lot of things that we can learn from this game, take away. Still, offensively, I think we need to find some more. There's too many plays we left out there. So I know it's to nitpick a game like that where you score 48 sounds kind of dumb, but still feel like we left some out there.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point Towerhead along with you on your Tuesday here on the game. It is time for Who Did the Heavy Lifting, brought to you by our friends over at TEC Equipment Rentals. That, of course, is the voice of Josh Allen, Buffalo Bills quarterback, after Sunday's 48-42 win over the previously 12-1 Detroit Lions. They did find a way to win, and he did the heavy lifting in that game. 23 of 34, 362 yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air, helping me be a part of the 559 yards of offense that Buffalo had en route to that victory, as Josh Allen, playing at an MVP level, also ran for 68 yards and 2 more touchdowns in that game. So 4 total touchdowns for Josh Allen as he continues to play just out of his mind this season. The Buffalo Bills look like truly one of the strongest teams in all of the NFL. And this was a game that many people were looking forward to on Sunday, just kind of see really who might be laying claim to top dog in the league at this point in time. And again, this is typically the point in the week where Jack and I do our NFL top 5, bottom 5, and we'll assign number 1 to a team that we think is playing the best as of right now. But since Jack's not here, I wanted to kind of focus on that number 1 spot as of right now, because we have both interchanged who our number 1 team is, and it's kind of a vibe and feel thing on a week-to-week basis, who won a better game the past weekend, who's playing better as of right now. But truly, when you think about who the best team in the NFL is right now, there's a lot of teams that make a very strong case. However, they're all flawed to some degree or the other that does give you pause for saying, okay, well, I think this team's going to make a run all the way to the Super Bowl and win the thing, which, again, that's usually the case for everybody in the NFL. Look, there's a reason there's only been one undefeated, team to win the whole thing, that being the 72 Dolphins. So every team is going to have its flaws, but I think it's interesting to look at each of these teams that I think make a very strong case for being the best team in the NFL as of, right now. And we'll start off with none other than the Buffalo Bills for having that win against Detroit this past weekend, and a game that, gosh, and he mentioned leaving some points out in the field. They missed, or Tyler Bass missed a very short field goal, so they could have had over 50 points very easily in this game to continue to add to what was already a impressive performance. And they, have obviously won big games this year. They took down Kansas City, handed them their only loss of the season so far, beat Detroit on the road on Sunday. Those are very impressive, things on the resume. My concern comes with the defense. They have given up nearly 1,000 yards over the course of these past 2 games between the Rams and the Lions. And again, those are good offenses that they're going up against, and they certainly have an offense that is able to keep pace. Now, they came up a little bit short against the Rams the prior week, and obviously were able to outpace the Lions on Sunday. But there's a reason they say defense wins championships, and that defense not being as efficient as it needs to be does give me a little bit of concern for Buffalo in terms of if they have the ability to win it all. Go to the other side of things. Detroit, the team that they beat, one that, again, only had 1 loss coming into the game. They're a fun team to watch. And, they do a lot of creative things on offense. Ben Johnson, very good offensive coordinator. And Dan Campbell, probably America's coach at this point in time, loves to be aggressive. But we saw on Sunday an example of how aggressiveness can be detrimental as well. They had just cut the lead to 10 points early on in the fourth quarter, and they went with an onside kick to try and steal a possession. Buffalo returned it to the 5-yard line and punched in for a touchdown. So they went from cutting the lead down to 10 to being back down 17 in basically the blink of an eye. And a decision like that is made out of, to a degree, knowing that you're not able to slow down that Buffalo offense. So again, trying to steal possession. I feel like it was a little too early to do that. And for the rest of the game, they were chasing points. So again, a very efficient team, but one that I feel like the aggressiveness of Dan Campbell can end up costing them. They obviously, ran into the situation in the NFC Championship game where they could have tied the game in the fourth quarter. They elected to go for it in San Francisco territory and ended up losing, obviously. The injuries are also piling up for them as well. So Aiden Hutchinson was obviously lost with a broken leg several weeks back. Now I've got multiple guys on defense, and David Montgomery from the weekend now out for the rest of the season. So the injuries are something that could hurt them going forward, especially as you get into the playoffs here coming up in a couple weeks. Kansas City, another team, sitting in only one loss this year, that being to the Buffalo Bills, that are always going to make a case for being one of the, if not the best teams in the NFL. That defense is really carrying that team as of right now. They turned the ball over, or they took away the ball like 7 times against a very hapless Cleveland Browns team this past weekend. And again, defense does win championships, but they're not playing their best on offense. And they haven't the entire year. They've been pulling games out of a hat, seemingly week in and week out. And now you have the injury to Patrick Mahomes on Sunday. It's not a broken ankle or anything like that, but it's injured nonetheless. And that's something that, you wonder how it's going to have a lingering effect. And yes, I know the same thing happened to him last year. They ended up winning the Super Bowl. But I just have not seen the best out of the Kansas City this year. But they've been winning games, and you got to give them credit for that. And you assume they're going to be playing their best football when the playoffs roll around, but we'll have to see. Again, they've certainly given us reason to give them the benefit of the doubt up to this point, but this is definitely the weaker across the board of the Kansas City teams that we've seen over these past couple of years when it comes to winning Super Bowls. I got to give a lot of credit to Philadelphia. They are in a 10-game winning streak, and they've been doing it despite the so-called drama that's been going on, whether it be between Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, or this latest thing with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. And, Hurts had the quote on Sunday after the game, after, having a very good game with A.J. Brown. Hey, it's what y'all wanted to see, right? So they are winning despite the outside noise. That being said, we've seen this team fall apart very quickly in years past. They did it last year after getting off to a really good start, and that's when the dynamics of what was going on inside that locker room really came to light and really started being a concern. So again, they're playing really good football right now, but I always have kind of that concern in the back of my mind that they could turn on a dime at any second, because we've seen them do that before. And then Minnesota, the last team that I think makes a strong case for being one of the best teams in the NFL, beating Chicago last night in Monday Night Football. They've had the benefit of facing some really bad teams as of late. Now, again, they've been winning, and winning in the NFL is hard regardless. But when you kind of look at the recent run of games, after losing to the Lions and the Rams, they beat the Colts, bad team, beat the Jaguars, bad team, beat the Titans, bad team, beat the Bears, bad team, Cardinals, decent, Falcons, less subpar, and then you beat the Bears again last night. So they've not exactly played the toughest teams as of late, and they close out the regular season with the Seahawks, the Packers, and the Lions. So I could see this being, a maybe 1-2 into the regular season for Minnesota, where they're not limping into the playoffs, but they don't go into it with as much momentum as you might think that they would have. So that's the one thing that kind of gives me a pause for them. But again, credit all these teams. They're all obviously in the double-digit win categories and all playing good football for the most part. But each and every one of them is flawed to a degree, which does, again, give you a little bit of concern in terms of which one might be able to go all the way and win the Super Bowl. But hey, at the end of the day, if I'm choosing a Super Bowl winner, it's probably going to come from that pool of teams. And again, we're getting down to the very end of the regular season to see who's going to position themselves for the playoffs and who does end up making that run all the way into mid-February. Got a pretty important basketball game coming up tonight over at Colonial Life Arena. Clemson coming to town for the annual rivalry between the two teams. This is a very big game for Coach Parris's crew. We'll dive into that a little bit coming up next. Hear what Coach Parris had to say yesterday in his preview of this matchup. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Tuesday on the game.
it's the next game. We're excited about playing a good team, a really good team. That's not to insinuate anyone that we have played is not good, but it's an in-state game. We're playing a mini ACC schedule on the side of what we got in the SEC. It's Clemson. So there's a lot of reasons to be excited, and you got a good team. They're not good because someone ranked them and they put a little number next to them. To the eyeball, they're good. They have good players. They do good things. They do winning things, and so it's a great opportunity for us. We're excited about it.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points Hour. Head along with you on your Tuesday here on The Game. That is Coach Paris. Yesterday, talking to the media at practice, as you heard all the basketballs bouncing behind him, about the excitement level of this game coming up tonight over at Colonial Life Arena, as they will take on Clemson, as they do each and every season, a top 25 Clemson team at that over at, Colonial Life Arena. And look, this game is always big because it's the in-state rivalry. The Palmetto Series, by the way, this year is 3-0-2 in South Carolina's favor. So another opportunity to add a win to that column to continue the dominance over the team from the upstate so far in sports this year. But this also feels like a game that South Carolina really needs to prove a point, right? This has been and by the way, I'm of the belief that this should be like the time when we're starting the college basketball season, like mid-December. I think it starts way too early. Early November at this point is ridiculous because you're just filling it with a lot of cupcake games that don't end up meaning a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, unless you lose them, as South Carolina did in game number 1 against North Florida. But when Carolina has played the better teams this year, they've lost those games. And this is a really good Clemson team that if you can beat, you make a statement and you carry a lot of momentum into SEC play. Because Carolina right now, out of everybody in the SEC, and half the league is ranked in the top 25, they're the only team in the SEC without a quad 1 or quad 2 win as of right now. So they don't have any quality wins on their resume up to this point in terms of anything that's going to impress the selection committee come Selection Sunday. So you give yourself an opportunity to do that, have a quality win that helps out your resume and essentially kind of cancels out the North Florida loss from a couple weeks ago, but it, I think, just proves if you can beat Clemson tonight that you'll be able to hang in the SEC because, again, this league looks as strong as it has ever looked in maybe ever up to this point. And if you go in without any quality wins, yeah, sure, you can maybe beat a Vanderbilt or something like that, but you're probably going to get eaten alive by the top of the SEC because you're going to have to go through pretty much all of them over the course of January, February, and early March. So this feels like a game tonight where Carolina has to prove itself more than anything else and instill confidence in the fan base going forward as SEC play fast approaches at the start of the new year for belief that this team's going to be something. Because, again, it's been a up and down non-conference slate. And, again, outside of North Florida, the teams they've lost to are fine opponents. But, again, we got kind of used to Carolina beating teams that maybe were a little bit better than them, last season, obviously on their way to the NCAA tournament. And you just don't quite have that feel as of right now with this team early on in this season. I will say, when you kind of look at these past couple games, and yes, it's not the stiffest of competition, but Colin Murray-Boyles has had 3 straight double-doubles. Nick Pringle has cut down on his fouls in the last couple games. Jamari Thomas has upped the assist a little bit more. He's had 15 assists in the past 3 games after only having 17 in the prior 7. We kind of know he's a different type of point guard than what Talon Cooper was, where he's not as pass first as Cooper was, but seems to be coming along a little bit in that regard. So you're seeing flashes of things that give you some optimism that maybe you're starting to gel and hit your stride a little bit with the South Carolina team. But again, you're taking on a very good and top 25 ranked Clemson team that is full of very good talent. returned 3 of their 5 starters from last year. P.J. Hall and Joseph Girard, the only ones that are not back in this lineup. Coming up tomorrow, you're going to have to see Chase Hunter again, who had 10 points against Carolina last year. Ian Shefflin, who had a double-double and 12 points, 12 rebounds against Carolina last year. And then Chauncey Wiggins, who had 15 points against the Gamecocks a season ago. So 3 guys, main contributors that Carolina is very familiar with, and a team in Clemson that, when you look at the metrics, 27th in KenPom, they're 11th in D1 experience. They have they're 34th in offensive rebounding percentage. This is a very good, very quality opponent that, again, if you can beat, people say, hey, look at Carolina. If you lose to them, people say, no, Carolina's just not as good as they were a season ago. And I think, again, I'm not saying it's the biggest game of Lamont Paris's career or anything like that, but winning this game gives you momentum. Much needed momentum going into what is going to be a murderer's row of SEC slate this year, just given how good this conference is. So, again, we'll see what happens. That game coming up tonight, 7 o'clock tip, pregame coverage starting at 6:30 right here on the game. In fact, as we wrap up today's edition of the X Point, before getting into the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating, have a pair of tickets right now to caller number 4 at 803-404-6100. Go win yourself some tickets and see the Gamecocks take on the Tigers coming up tonight at Colonial Life Arena. 803-404-6100. Take caller number 4 right now. Tyler Head for Twin Peaks. I tell you about them all the time, but I'll remind you once again, there's no better place than Twin Peaks to hang out, especially during the holiday season. Coming up on Friday, December the 20th, it is National Ugly Christmas Sweater Day, and there's only one thing better than an epic, ugly Christmas sweater. That's scoring free chips and queso for wearing one. You get at Twin Peaks on Friday all day. Support your favorite ugly Christmas sweater and get your free chips and queso celebrating National Ugly Christmas Sweater Day. It's also the start of the Red Hot Costume Party during December 20th through 24th, as Santa's little helpers are making their way down from the North Pole, hanging out the entire time at Twin Peaks. You don't want to miss that. TVs as far as the eye can see, delicious food, and of course those 29-degree cold draft beers, all with our friends at Twin Peaks down in the Vista. 10 o'clock on your Tuesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you here on the game. Week before Christmas. Week of the college football playoff first round games coming up this weekend. It's obviously a new thing, right? Typically, in the 14 playoff era, the BCS era, you had like that month off between like the conference championship games and that next round of games. We're jumping right back into it. We are 3 days away from the next round of meaningful games in college football, and I'm pretty excited for what we're going to see this weekend. Don't know if all the games are going to be good, but excited nonetheless.
It is exciting. It's a different vibe, different year. You don't think some of these games are going to be good?
I feel like some of them can teeter on blowouts.
We've seen that before in the playoff.
Yeah, really, when you think about it, between national championships and the semifinal games, roughly about half of the games of the first 10 years of the playoff were blowouts to some degree. Georgia blew out TCU in the national championship game. Clemson blew out Alabama in that one championship game. LSU blew out Clemson in the championship game, and tons of semifinals just ended up being not that interesting. And while I guess technically the later games will probably be better, still some of these first-round games, to me, kind of have the potential of getting a little lopsided.
What's your pick for the most likely to get lopsided game? I have mine.
Personally, Texas and Clemson.
In which favor?
Texas.
Really?
I think Texas probably dominates Clemson in this game.
I just have a feeling. And Tyler, you obviously, it's not like you came here from, California or something.
Right.
But as you have become more ingrained in Gamecock culture, you've heard about the Clemson horseshoe.
Yes, I'm familiar.
Wes mentioned it the other day. And there will be some that say that game is going to be closer than the experts think.
Just because it's Clemson?
Yes, I'm among them. I would not be shocked if they won, actually.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't. I realize it's a road game and all that. I am picking Texas. But I don't think that one's going to be a blowout. I don't trust Texas.
Okay.
I don't trust them. They haven't beaten anybody good this year, really. Now, you could say Clemson hasn't beaten anybody really good either, except, SMU.
Right.
Which we still don't really know how good SMU is because they haven't beaten anybody good either.
We'll find out Saturday at noon.
We're going to find out on all these teams. It is fascinating because you have a lot of these teams where you look at, okay, Texas, who have they beaten? Clemson, who have they beaten? Penn State, who have they beaten? SMU, who have they beaten? You've got a lot of that going on. So I tend to think Clemson, Texas. I could be wrong. I will certainly come on and say I was dead wrong if Texas blows the Tigers out. I just feel like this is going to be a little bit closer. My pick, actually, as much as I hate to say it, I could see Notre Dame really taking care of Indiana.
It's another one that could get out of hand. Again, Indiana won 11 games. Notre Dame won 11 games. Honestly, I'm struggling here because I have a feeling this game could be closer than we think.
So you got the close. We have the opposite ends of the spectrum.
I think this game has the potential to be closer than Texas and Clemson, in my opinion.
Okay, I'm not shocked there.
And it's not scientific. That's just off of vibes right now.
I just look at Notre Dame, and now again, this is against competition that's lesser than Indiana, in my opinion. But man, you just look at how they finished the season. They did have a close game against Louisville, which is a ranked team. At the time, Louisville was 15th nationally, and they won that game by 7. But after that, they're blowing people out. It's 49-7, 31-13, 51-14, 52-3. They ended the regular season with a 49-35 win over Southern Cal, but they're scoring points. They're blowing some people out. Indiana played, of course, a pretty soft schedule. By the way, the matchup predictor from ESPN says 70.5% in favor of Notre Dame in this game. Indiana blew some teams out too, right?
Yeah.
They beat Michigan State by 37. They beat Nebraska 56-7. So they beat Purdue 66-0, right? But the best team that they played, Ohio State, 38-15, didn't look great. Maybe that was an aberration because in some of the other games this season, they have really turned it on. Notre Dame, I mean, both these teams are pretty good. When I look at the 4 games this weekend, that's the one where I feel like we have the best opportunity for like a multiple score margin. But hey, if Indiana wins, I'm not going to be absolutely flabbergasted. If they keep it close, I'm not going to be shocked.
Regardless, looking forward to it and just seeing on-site playoff games for the first time ever is going to be neat. I don't know if you guys have gotten the chance to talk about this or not. I was very disappointed to hear that the home field environment is going to be slightly neutered by the college football playoff. Sterilized, I guess is a better word there. Ross Bjork went on the radio the other day in Columbus and said, yeah, we have to like play a pregame video package for Tennessee, which again, that's not anything huge, but it's more, I guess, kind of the principle of it, right? Because we deal with this in the NCAA tournament for the women, where you have, a couple of the first couple round games at home sites. When the NCAA baseball tournament, goes to regionals and super regionals, you as a host are limited on things you can do. You can't play your own walk-up music, things like that, where, again, earning the right to host these rounds, you feel like you should be able to have a true home field environment. Now, yes, the fact that you can't play your own walk-up music doesn't change whether you win or lose games, but still, it does affect the overall atmosphere, and I hate the fact that we're now trickling this into college football as well.
Yeah, I don't get it. When you earn, we talked about this last week, Tyler, when you weren't here one of the days, actually. Wes and I talked about this. When you earn a bye, and this is different than what you're saying, but same point, along the same lines, you earn a bye and you don't get to play at home, right?
Yeah.
Kind of weird.
Yeah.
I mean,
which I think that's probably going to change.
Right. You skip a game, which is fantastic because you obviously, but your reward, like think about Arizona State, okay? Arizona State is going to play in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And, let's say Clemson upsets Texas. You're going to play Clemson in Atlanta? That's not an advantage. That's a disadvantage, right?
Right.
I know we got to protect the bowls and all that, but, to me, it's kind of weird. Shouldn't you get a bye and the ability to play at home? Again, I know we got to play the bowls. Play the bowls in the first round.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of that. And I'm not a huge fan of the sterilization, neutering, however you want to classify it, whatever you want to call it, of these first-round games. I mean, when you're playing a home game, it's not supposed to be fair.
No, you earn the right to host that game, so you should get whatever bills and advantages there are. If it's playing music or traditions or things like that. Terry brought up a good point earlier. We were talking about it. Well, let's just say in the NFL, right? Let's say the Steelers are hosting a playoff game against the Chargers, but the NFL says, hey, you're not allowed to wave the terrible towel and you can't play Renegade in the fourth quarter. Two traditions of Steeler football games. Well, that takes away something from the home field environment, which, again, that's not usually what determines whether you win or lose a game, but it can go into the overall atmosphere and overall environment that can have an effect on the other team that, again, I don't know why college sports are dead set on trying to sterilize these things.
Yeah, think about if South Carolina is fortunate enough to host a home playoff game one year. And let's just say, just for the most jarring example possible, let's say somehow they got matched up with Clemson in the playoff. Mm-hmm. And, you're sitting there in Williams-Brice before the game. Everybody's keyed up, just ready to go. You've been tailgating all day. And then you're in the stadium and you're checking out the video board, and here comes a hype video for Clemson. Right? How weird is that?
Right.
It's not – and I get it because – the NCAA's counter may be, or the playoff committee, it's still a home game, right? You still get your home fans. You still get to do all these things. It's still an advantage. Yes, it's still an advantage overall. But if you're rewarding teams, that's literally why you play the games. You play the games to get into the playoff. You play the games to make it as advantageous as possible, right? And so, again, I go back to the Arizona State example. Arizona State, because of where they landed in the seeding, they may be playing a neutral site game that is basically like almost like a road game for them at the end of the day. And even if they had not gotten that bye and they had a home game in Arizona, you got an atmosphere that's neutered. So I don't get it. We got to get rid of the notion, we got to make everything super even. Like if you're rewarding a team, reward them. Let them reap the benefits of it.
And here's something else I didn't even realize until I heard James Franklin talking about it the other day. They can't use this, Penn State hosting a home playoff game against SMU. This is not a traditional recruiting type of weekend either. And now, yes, I know obviously you just signed most of your 2025 class, but thinking about 26, 27, you don't have the opportunity to host recruits in the same way you would for a normal home game. And the way James Franklin describes, he says, although this is a Penn State home game, this is not our game. It's really run by the playoffs and don't control the ticket. So typically in a big game like this where, hey, we can go and bring in a ton of recruits that are going to come see a playoff atmosphere, environment, and watch us play in a very meaningful game in pursuit of a national championship, you can't do that. And again, I think about the potential advantage having a home playoff game would have if you're allowed to do this that these teams don't get to have.
Well, we saw they made a change, non-playoff games, right? But schools at neutral site games can, quote-unquote, host recruits now.
Right.
Now, that's different. If you go South Carolina, North Carolina playing in Charlotte, right? That's a little bit different. You're not, hey, come to our facility. You're not at your facility, but you could still host recruits. So, again, it's just you go down the list, and when you first hear, hey, teams that earn the ability, you earn it. You're not given it.
Yep.
You earn the ability based on making the playoff, your seeding, you earn that ability to get the home playoff game, and you hear that, you go, man, that's awesome. What an advantage. And it's still cool, but they're just they're ticking off several of the boxes that make home games awesome. And we always talked about, when we first heard about the home playoff game, we're like, man, imagine if Williams-Brice could ever do that. I mean, it's still exciting to think about, but then when you start knocking down all these factors that make that such an awesome thought, it's a little less exciting, which is a shame. But sometimes the playoffs, sometimes the NCAA, they make it a no fun situation.
Well, and that's the thing. We know the NCAA has done this for the longest time with respective tournaments and other sports, but the playoff committee is its own separate entity. The FBS football is not controlled. The championship is not controlled by the NCAA. They had the opportunity to be different. They decided not to. So, again, kind of falls in line with what happens with those other tournaments, which is unfortunate. And, again, things can change. I fully expect the structure of the college football playoff to change drastically here in the next couple of years, and maybe some of these rules will end up changing with that. We'll certainly have to see. Big news yesterday out of Tallahassee, a restructuring of a contract giving back to the school for Mike Norvell. We'll hit that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Schooling and Heating. Tyler and Chris on your Tuesday here on The Game.
All right, guys, I want to tell you about our friends over at Integrated Media. By the way, Michael, Nathan, the team, they're about to open a new Pro Swing location. Can't wait to see that. IntegratedMediaInc.com or 803-948-8327. And while we're talking about Pro Swing and while we're talking about golf simulators, yes, they can actually install one in your home if you want. So give them a call about that if you want, 803-948-8327. You can also check them out on Instagram and Facebook. They have so many really cool examples of work that they've done at homes and businesses, whether it's making sure your internet signal is outstanding so that you have no dead spots, can stream all the latest stuff, can handle anything that your home or business may need from a streaming standpoint. They can mount TVs. They can install Sonos wireless speakers, sound bars, security and cameras, anything that you may need. IntegratedMediaInc.com integrated.com, Integrated Media Columbia on Instagram and Facebook, or 803-948-8327.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling Heating. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you here on your Tuesday on the game. Reminder again tonight, men's basketball taking on Clemson, 6:30 pregame, 7 o'clock tip over at Colonial Life Arena, which you can listen to right here on the game. Very busy month in college football. Obviously, things going on with transfer portal getting set for playoffs and bowl games, as well as some coaches making some headlines here recently. Had this with Mike Gundy the other week, and then yesterday, Mike Norvell. His contract has been restructured, the right word here. He's basically giving back about half of what he was allotted in his extension this past offseason, basically paying back into the school after kind of having the obviously dismal 2-10 season coming off the heels of the 12-0 regular season last year.
It's a big chunk,
it's,
right?
I mean, but basically half of it.
He got a big chunk.
He did, and they're like, hey, turns out you weren't worth it.
There's a few different things to unpack in this. I do think this will be a trend because in college football, college athletics, it's very copycat business.
Sure.
When one person, one entity, one school does something, especially if it works, other schools start doing it. I mean, there are so many examples of this. I remember when Alabama Like under Saban, Alabama was one of the first schools, college football programs, to really lean into we're going to have a creative department, right? Video, graphics, the whole built by Bama brand. Now look at it. Everybody does it.
Yeah.
Everybody does it because it was effective. It worked. And there are so many examples of that. So my first reaction, I think the Brian Kelly thing happened first, where he said,
Yes.
I'm going to give back $1 million to NIL efforts. As soon as I saw that, I went, a bunch of people are going to do that now.
Here we go.
So we're going to see more of it. I think that's one trend. And I've seen some people ask, I thought that university employees couldn't contribute to NIL. Things have changed, right? Because it's revenue sharing now, and you could structure it creatively if you wanted, whether it doesn't have to be a legitimate give back. It can just be like Norvell's doing. It sounds like he's maybe not even giving it back, like writing checks. I write you a check, you write me a check. It's just slash my salary.
Yeah, essentially cut the salary in half, and this money, the $4.5 million, is going directly into the revenue sharing fund, which again in turn pays the athletes for Florida State for coming up next year. And again, I don't know Florida State's exact NIL situation. I imagine it's pretty good, but I don't know if we thought of them as one of the teams that was going to struggle to get to that mark. But if anything else, this is just helping them get there quicker.
The other thing that I think this illustrates is we all wonder, for years and years, I'm going to say college football, and by that I mean the NCAA, administrators, coaches, they would say, especially in the administrative side of it in the NCAA, how are we going to pay athletes? There's not enough money. It's like, okay, you're paying coaches $10 million a year. There's some money in there.
Sure.
They got a little wiggle room here.
Sure.
And certainly, it is a challenge. I am empathetic to the fact that it's gotten harder to run an athletics department because of how much it costs to run an athletics department. And now every Power 4 school is staring down the barrel of, all right, we got to figure out a way to come up with $20 million per year, $20 million extra dollars. Because if you're not spending it in revenue share, you are going to fall behind. Now, some of the decisions that they made that spent in excess on staff, coaching salaries, whatever, those are the things that they're going to need to cut out. Those are your easiest ones. But my question has been, and other people have wondered this, all right, now that we're in the NIL rev sharing era, are some of these huge coaching contracts going to settle down? It's a yes and no based on what we've seen so far. We're still seeing big coaching contracts. Later this afternoon, South Carolina's Board of Trustees is going to approve some new coaching contracts. One will be for Mike Shula, the new OC. My assumption is it's probably going to be like $1 million. I honestly don't have any information, but it's not like we're going to see this contract and, Mike Shula's making $100,000 as an OC. No, they're not cutting it like that. The coaching contracts are still big, but what we have seen, Tyler, is what we saw with Norvell, what we saw with Mike Gundy, where it's, hey, man, you didn't have all that good of a season. Let's figure something out here. And in the past, that would have been almost unfathomable. Now we're seeing a little bit of a push of, even if you have a contract, in a couple instances that we've seen so far, maybe this is going to be a little bit more performance-based.
I've heard it referred to as the loser's tax, where like, okay, here's your contract, but understand if you go 3-9, you're going to have to pay some of this back going into the next year. And hey, if you have another good season, if you have a good season after that, we'll straighten things out. But yeah, you have a subpar season, especially at a school like Oklahoma and Florida State that both had high expectations going into this year to compete for their conference championships and maybe make the playoffs. Yeah, you're going to have to help us out a little bit there. And again, when you're trying to get on equal footing with everybody going into this new era, you need every dollar you can get. So getting $4.5 million from Mike Norvell, I forget what number Gundy was paying back into, but obviously a significant chunk of change for one of the higher paid coaches in college football. This goes a long way, and you kind of talk about the arms race that has been coaching salaries, and we brought this up before. When Spurrier got here 20 years ago, I mean, crossing over into the million mark was rarefied air for coaches. And I'm looking at the highest paid coaches in college football now. You got to scroll all the way down to, I'm in the 70s now, and you're still getting guys making it in two. I mean, you got to go down to 93. Rice head coach Mike Bloomgren is making $981,000. He's the first coach below $1 million.
Didn't he just get fired too?
I think he just got fired too. So there you go. This is an old list because you still got Sean Clark as the App State head coach, but you're having to go almost into the hundreds before you find coaches making under $100,000 or making under $1 million.
Yeah, I mean, I saw somebody on the Insiders Forum on Gamecock Central was talking about the Norvell Kelly thing and wondering, hey, will this be a trend? And somebody asked, is Shane Beamer doing this? And to my knowledge, I mean, could be, but to my knowledge, no. He also doesn't have a loser's tax this year.
Exactly.
And somebody said his compared to those guys, his salary's paltry. And you go, what? But it's like, well, he does, quote unquote, only make $6.25 million compared to, 10, 9.
And again, this is kind of, and everything in college football is, like you said, it's copycat, it's an arms race where, looking at it, Kirby Smart's the highest paid head coach at $13 million. And, if NIL and all this kind of stuff wasn't around, then we're probably looking at 15 years where, below average coaches are probably making $13 million because that's just the market and the numbers going up and up and up. But it is going to be interesting to see over the next 5 to 10 years where these numbers bore out. And again, guys that already have approved contracts are going to get paid what they're being paid. But when you talk about that next cycle of great head coaches coming up in the next handful of years, what are their contracts going to look like? Is it going to be these same gaudy numbers or just kind of come back down to earth as time goes along?
Will we see more performance-laden contracts? Obviously coaches and agents are going to fight against that. But we've seen some contracts that have come up, been proposed lately, and I don't mean at South Carolina, just across the country, where, there's a heavy emphasis on this guy will get this much money, but heavy incentives, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're at a major school, you're not getting a coach for $1 million a year. That's just not happening. But will some of the numbers not be quite so out of control? Will administrators make more of a push for coaches who are even having great success? What we always like to say, you're either getting extended or getting fired.
Yep.
But will the extension dollars go down a little bit to where there's more of a two-way street where the administration's saying, hey, Kirby Smart, instead of us paying you $12 million and giving you $1 million a year raise, like, can we help each other out here and have a little bit more balance so we can pay our rev share? Maybe so.
I saw Andy Staples of On3. I don't know if you remember this or not, but apparently at the spring meetings in 2011, Steve Spurrier proposed something similar to this of coaches paying back in to give stipends to players during the regular season. Apparently he had a lot of coaches in the conference that agree with him on that. Obviously that ended up coming to fruition, but I guess he was before his time on predicting these things.
He was probably also thinking a stipend for essentials and not or maybe a little bit more than essentials, but not the figures that we're seeing in college football right now.
Listen, when NIL became a thing, I didn't think we were going to be seeing the figures you'd be seeing, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are, NIL was being done already. No, I mean, yes, but the figures.
Bryce Underwood's getting $10 million at Michigan, and he hasn't played a snap of college football.
The figures are not even close, y'all.
That's guaranteed, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, he could suck, and they bench him, and guess what? Still got to pay him.
Getting that money.
That's the dangerous line you walk, but as is the world of college football we live in. NIL is obviously crazy, but the college football calendar also sucks. And we saw a pretty glaring example yesterday of how this can have an effect on the college football playoff as soon as this weekend. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Chris on your Tuesday on the Game.
If you are looking for a local, a reliable roofing company, we're going to recommend our friends over at Classic Roofing, classicroofingsc.com. Customer satisfaction is guaranteed with our guys Joe Reeder and Mac Sawyer from Classic Roofing. Again, that's classicroofingsc.com. Of course, taking good care of your roof can be challenging. You don't have to go at it alone, though, because the guys over at Classic Roofing, their team, they have years of expertise under their hats. They are a GAF certified roofer. Only about 7% of roofers nationwide had that certification. They know what they're doing. They're your go-to residential and commercial roofing company for homes and businesses all around the Midlands. ClassicRoofingSC.com or give Joe Mack a call, 803-590-7870. Roof inspections, installations, replacements, repairs. They can do it all for you. 803-590-7870.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Chris along with you here on your Tuesday. By the way, did you know that there's a bowl game tonight? Memphis and West Virginia playing at 9 o'clock. Man.
Chance to see Mario Anderson again.
That's right. Man,
Unless he hasn't opted out.
He is
soon.
not.
Okay.
At this point, I would assume you are not going to opt out at the 11th hour. But yeah, he was a big part in Memphis beating Tulane on Thanksgiving night to end Tulane's playoff chances. So yeah, we want to see Mario Anderson tonight, 9 o'clock ESPN taking on West Virginia. We're starting bowl games so early now because of the college football playoff. It's just like I saw that. I'm like, wow, we got a bowl game tonight. It's pretty neat. We obviously know the college football calendar is a mess. The month of December alone, you're signing your class, you're jumping into the portal, bringing guys in from the portal. You're obviously getting prepared for a bowl game or the playoff or whatever it may be. And, we've seen plenty of teams be affected bowl game-wise by guys jumping in the portal, but we've never really seen it when it comes to the college football playoff. Yesterday, something significant happened. Bo Pribula of Penn State has entered the transfer portal. Now, he is the backup quarterback to Drew Aller, but he is somebody that does play quite a bit in packages, came in at the end of the game against Wisconsin, helped lead Penn State to that comeback after Drew Aller got hurt. So he's a very important part of what Penn State football does going into this weekend against SMU. He's in the portal now, and he will not be available this weekend as he searches for a new home. Let's go with cut number 3 here, Ed. This is James Franklin yesterday talking to the media about the Bo Pribula transfer and the fact we've got big problems in college football.
We talked last week, had no intentions of leaving, but we got problems in college football. And I can give you my word, Bo Pribula did not want to leave our program, and he did not want to leave our program until the end of the season. But the way the portal is and the timing of it and the way our team is playing, and when you play the position of quarterback and there's only one spot and those spots are filling up, he felt like he was put in a no-win situation. And I agree with him. And number one, I hate for it. Number one, most importantly, for Bo Pribula. I don't think it's in the best interest of the student athlete. I don't think it's in the best interest of college football. But I think that's our challenge right now, right? Who is really running college football and making the best decisions for the student athletes and for our sport as a whole?
Question to answer that question is nobody's actually running college football. It's a group of people that don't seem to know, what they're doing, obviously, and the schedule is a prime example of that. So let's think about this from Bo Pribula's perspective here, right? For those that don't know, when your season extends past, the portal closed, officially closed at the end of this week, I think. Is that it, or is it the 20th? I think is when the portal technically closes.
Well, you've got the exceptions.
And that's what I was going to say.
Bowl game,
you have the actual portal closing, but if you play past that, so if your bowl game is past the portal close window, which I think is the 20th, you get 5 days after that to enter the portal and still be deemed okay in doing that. Let's think about this from Bo Pribula's perspective. Of course, he's on Penn State's team. And in his mind, that team is good enough to go win the national championship, which would mean he's not entering the portal until January the 21st. 3 weeks into school for a lot of places out there. And obviously, a lot of teams would have already handled their quarterback needs in the portal at that point. So if Bo Pribula wants to go start at another powerful institution, he's got to go now. And unfortunately for him, the decision came down to I either go in the portal now or I stay and hope we win the national championship. He chose the first option and is now searching for a new home, which again prevents him from playing for Penn State, which again, he plays an important role in that team and has packages and stuff like that because of his mobility that Drew Aller just doesn't have. And I don't think that's going to be the reason why Penn State would lose this weekend, but it's certainly something significant that, again, we've not really run into in the 14 playoff era.
Yeah, and Drew Aller, the starter for Penn State, is coming back next year.
Yep.
So that factors in.
Which when we saw Pribula transfer, that was kind of an indication of, okay, well, Aller's probably coming back then.
That's right. It is tough, and to go back to the recruiting calendar, the one thing that was done that personally I liked, and I haven't heard any negatives from coaches, administrators, players on this, is they moved signing day back to, what was that, December 4th.
Yep.
So it's one less thing to juggle. Now, you can still go recruit kids and sign them in February.
Sure.
But the vast majority of your class from the high school or junior college ranks is going to sign in that early period. And so that's kind of out of the way. That's nice. You don't have coaches on the road, because that was another thing. You're last year and the years before, since the early signing period started in 2018, and then the portal came along a few years ago, you were juggling all the stuff that's being juggled now, but you also had high school kids visiting throughout the month of December.
Yep.
You had coaches taking flights throughout the month of December to go all around the country to visit high school recruits. So that was a lot. So I think that was actually a positive. But to go back to the other part of it, I saw some people after Pribula said he was leaving. Well, he could have waited until after the playoffs. He gets the extra window. The portal closes December 28th, I verified, but he gets that extra time.
Yep.
Okay. How many schools have a slot open at that point? Right? So that's where the impossible decision comes in. I want to go somewhere and play next year. Can I find a place that, to your point, Tyler, academics are still part of college?
Yeah, we forget about that. That is important.
But can you find a school? Classes begin at South Carolina, for example, January 13th. Last day to change or drop a course is January 21st.
Mm-hmm.
So can I find a school that academically it fits in with that schedule? And then can I find a school that doesn't have a quarterback? We're seeing quarterbacks commit places now. And Bo Pribula is a good player. Presumably, he would probably be able to stay at the Power 4 level if he wants. Where will he have a spot?
Right.
So, I mean, this is a tough deal for him.
Yeah, and again, James Franklin, understood Pribula's situation there, wasn't knocking him for making that decision. It is unfortunate that it is potentially going to have an effect over, what is going to be a very important game this weekend between them and SMU. And again, we see so many highlighting examples of just how crazy this stuff is. And you wonder when it can change, how it can change. Because, again, there's no central person. There's not a Roger Goodell. There's not an Adam Silver. There's not a Rob Manfred that you can go to and say, hey, here's an issue with your league. What are you going to do to it? We just have this nameless, faceless entity in the NCAA that just kind of presides over everything but doesn't really do anything at the same time. So I don't see any of this stuff changing in the near future.
I don't know. I mean, some of those people you needed, you mentioned, though, or would we want to go to somebody like like them to fix it? Maybe in some cases.
At least you have a central authority figure saying, okay, when there's a problem, that's the person that is going to address it. That's the person that's going to tell us what's going to happen. The NCAA can put out a statement. And, yeah, you have Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, but he doesn't really serve that commissioner type of role. Nobody does.
Yeah. The other thing is I've seen some people say, okay, well, the fix is to get rid of this portal window and only have a spring one. That's a no-go. I mean, you can't do that because do I need to remind everybody about how often the NCAA has been sued?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Imagine that. Imagine, hey, guys, cool if you want to transfer. You can only do it in the spring. I mean, no.
Well, I see
not going to work.
I see a lot of people bringing up that, well, the NCAA needs to mandate you got to sit out unless you're a graduate transfer. Well, that's going to be another lawsuit because that's how they've gotten to this point. Because with NIL, you're now limiting earning potential by saying, hey, the Ted Walker situation, you can transfer, but you can't play. Well, now you're affecting me making money because I'm not on the field.
Yeah, I mean, that's how, you have to view everything now through the lens of, okay, we can try this fix, but are we going to get sued? And the answer is probably yes.
Yes, and they're probably going to lose.
Because in courts, precedents matter, and the precedent that has been set is the NCAA is losing constantly.
Joe Klatt had a thought on a potential schedule change that didn't really have anything to do with NIL or the transfer portal, but I thought it was pretty interesting given the fact that Army and Navy played this past weekend. We'll tell you what that is coming up next. It is the Gamecock Club Hour, presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Chris on your Tuesday on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Crane Schooling and Heating. Tyler and Chris along with you on your Tuesday. Here on the game, I mentioned earlier tonight, men's basketball taking on Clemson, 7 o'clock tip. Pregame coverage at 6:30 right here on the game. I have another pair of tickets right now for caller number 4 at 803-404-6100. Ed Burt standing by to take your call to get those tickets to see the men's team take on Clemson coming up tonight. Before you take those calls, though, Ed, Joe Klatt on his podcast the other day had an interesting suggestion for a schedule change in college football as it pertains to Army and Navy. Cut number 6 here, Ed.
And I've got the fix for Army, Navy, and the postseason. And that is clear out the Army, Navy weekend and allow the playoffs to start early. Where does Army, Navy go? Week 0. Week 0. Think about it. Let me just paint the picture for just a moment. No other football game happens in America until Army, Navy play on their own day. So there's no college football in week 0. No. Not like we know it now where there's these random games in random places and some of them are played overseas and so on and so forth. No. We kick our sport in America off with Army, Navy. It's the only game. And it's week 0 of college football.
And, going back to this past weekend, Navy obviously, winning this year's edition of the Army-Navy game, it does kind of feel like, especially with the expanded playoff, the spotlight around that game gets diminished a little bit. Obviously, you've always had it, at least in recent years, on the same day as the Heisman Trophy ceremony. So there's always that was going on. Now we're starting bowl games on the same day as Army-Navy. Obviously, I have the playoffs coming up this upcoming weekend. It just kind of feels like it's getting overshadowed a little bit more than it has in years past. And, I mean, I don't think it's a terrible idea, that being the lone game on week 0 that kind of sets the table for the full college football season. I don't know if the traditionalist around that game would want it being played in 85-degree weather compared to the frosty conditions we typically see, but I don't think it's a bad idea.
Well, the only bummer about it is Wes couldn't watch the Army-Navy game anymore.
That's right, because he does not believe in week 0, so he'd never be able to see that game again.
Now he would probably move the goalpost. He's not even here to defend himself.
No,
yet.
He's not.
He'll
be here in 9 minutes.
He would probably say, well, since that's getting moved to week 0, then it becomes an actual college football weekend. As opposed, no offense to whoever normally plays on week 0.
And I also think it's interesting now because both Army and Navy are in the American Athletic Conference. Army won the American Athletic Conference, by the way. Those teams are technically in position to make the playoff now if they win the conference. And again, Army was close to being the Group of 5 representative.
Yeah, they were in the rankings.
If Boise had faltered down the stretch or something along those lines. So now you present a situation where one of those teams could play in the playoff if they win the American Athletic Conference championship, and now we're playing an extra game in between that. So again, then that's not going to say they're going to be in there every single year, but I don't totally hate the idea of Army and Navy playing in week 0 as opposed to the extra Saturday in September, especially, and with what I'm assuming is going to be expanded playoffs coming in a couple of years. It's probably going to infringe on that again.
Yeah, you're going to have another game to fit in there, and you're going to have, to bring it back full circle, you're going to have all the transfer portal activity.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I do think having the early signing day for, again, which is used for high school, junior college recruiting, I actually like where they put that. I'm being a little bit selfish when I say that because it's just a little bit less on us, right? But from what I have seen and heard from college coaches, administrators, it was better for them too because, again, it's one less thing and a substantial thing that they're having to juggle. They're not having to juggle, all right, which coaches are going where this month? We got to catch a flight to Pennsylvania. Oh, the weather's bad. We got to turn around and come back. We'll go to North Carolina instead. And trying to juggle all those things while you're still doing the transfer portal and you're still doing bowl practice, like there's a lot going on. So to move that back, I do think that was a positive. If somebody can point out some negatives, certainly I'll listen to them. But I think that was good. The part that we need to address is just the portal's not good. You can't say I don't think that the portal is going to close after the postseason or after the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a path to doing that. I don't even know if it's a good idea. I do think after the season, that seems like a very logical time to let players who, again, we know from court rulings are going to be allowed to go other places. What time makes more sense than that other than the spring window? So my point is, I don't think you can have just one in the spring. If anything, golly, they may create another portal window at some point. We're going to have one after the summer or something.
Well, that's the thing, is because high school recruiting and the transfer portal are codependent on one another, because you say, okay, well, here's what I signed in my class. Where do I need to fill holes? And vice versa, saying, okay, here's what I've lost in the transfer portal. Where do I need to go and fill holes with that as well? So it's not a simple fix, which is why it's still a mess up to this point. And I don't know what the exact perfect solution looks like, because there's going to be a downside to, I think, whatever kind of move that you make. Again, I think it's one of those situations when it came about, we never saw it getting this big, but what the numbers back it up, you're getting more and more guys going to the portal each and every year. By the way, not all of them come out of the portal, by the way. That's something we don't really talk about a whole lot. Some of these guys leverage their future and just don't end up getting picked up, which, effectively ends their football careers. But again, when you give them the opportunity and think they can find something better, they're going to try and do that.
As of right now, according to On3's transfer portal wire, 1,796 transfer portal entries.
Good Lord.
214 have committed somewhere, 19 have withdrawn. So,
man,
it's big numbers.
It is a big number. And again, it's just part of college football now. Got to live with it. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Club Hour, presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on your Tuesday on the Game.